Hello, people on Zoom. Happy to see you.
I'll give just a quick introduction.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. For those of you who don't know, Venerable Robina Courtin has worked full-time for Lama Thupten Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's organization, the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition, since her ordination in the late 1970s. Over the years, she has served as editorial director of Wisdom Publications, editor of Mandala Magazine, executive director of Liberation Prison Project, and as a touring teacher of Buddhism. Her life and work with prisoners has been featured in the documentary films Chasing Buddha and Key to Freedom. Venerable Robina is known for her straightforward and energetic teaching style, helping people discover the potential of their own minds with clear explanations about Tibetan Buddhism and how to apply it to their lives. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, everybody. All right, here we are again. So we think we're going to be here for an hour and 90 minutes together. So we're going to make the most of it, listen, think about, analyze these words to see if we can find some advice from it, because it is advice. Whether we want to take it or not, that's up to us. So advice about what we'll hear, particularly about the mind, which of course is Buddha's expertise, you know. Buddha's main expertise is the human mind. What it is, how it functions, and crucially, its potential, you know. So we're going to sit in, discuss that, and hopefully some result comes, and we might even just put 1% of it into practice. Why? So that we can develop our true nature, quite literally the way of putting it, so that we can also benefit others, because we live interdependently on this planet. Help ourselves and help others. Okay. So Mahamudra, this term, I don't know when it first started being used, but it's what it refers to is a particular practice that in the Gelug tradition, but also in the Kagyu first, but and it's based on a text by 17th century Lama, Panchen Lama, which it seems, apparently, according to Lama Yeshe, his book, what I'm talking about here is based on Lama Yeshe's teachings in the book that's called Mahamudra, published by Wisdom, which I happen to edit. It's a commentary on this text by Panchen Lama about this particular meditation technique. So, and it's called Mahamudra. I don't know even the Tibetan word for it, but in Sanskrit, that's something like great seal. It's referring to emptiness. Basically, it's a synonym for the word emptiness, because it is what defines everything that exists. This ultimate reality of everything that exists. This word emptiness, which we're going to talk about. And this teaching apparently it was kind of passed on from the master to the disciple, and then it was Panchen Lama, certainly in our tradition, the Gelugpas, who wrote it down. This very short text, who wrote the instructions down. So, like I said, really, the mind is Buddha's expertise. Initially, when we think about Buddhism, we mightn't think of it like that. Certainly in modern psychology or neuroscience, we definitely do not think that Buddha's expertise is the mind. We think we invented all that, you know. But I always like to quote His Holiness. He said, you know, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. Not, as we probably thought, Mr. Freud 100 years ago. And it's only really now, I think, more and more, especially because of His Holiness, that people in modern thinkers are now realizing the astonishing body of knowledge, not just from Buddha, but these genius Indians before him, you know. And their expertise was the mind. They're the ones who created this incredibly sophisticated psychological skill, that's called the development of pointed concentration. When Buddha diverged in his own direction, specifically in relation to his own direct experiential findings about the nature of self. I mean, this is one of the key techniques he brought with him. These genius Indians developed the ability to discover the subtler levels of our mind at a subtler level. There's nothing like this remotely in modern psychology or in neuroscience. It's an incredibly clear skill, and Mahamudra uses this skill. This technique of Mahamudra meditation uses this skill invented by these genius Indians. And it's the ability to completely subdue the grosser level of our cognition, of our mind, which is all we ever know, which is the level we live at in our daily lives, and all we know in neuroscience and psychology, which for the Buddha is just the tip of the iceberg, the grosser level of our capacity for cognition, which is the mind. So in order to understand this meditation technique, we need to understand what Buddha means by the mind, obviously. If you enter straight into the technique, it's a given. What the mind is a given, but most of us, perhaps being not coming from this tradition, assume when we say mind, we refer to the brain, like the neuroscientists, not for the Buddha. So our mind or our consciousness, these words are used virtually synonymously in Buddhism. I think in the West, when we use modern psychology, when we use the word consciousness, we sort of think of something slightly more special. But these words are exactly the same meaning in Buddhism, mind or consciousness. So the mind is defined, its definition of the mind, two parts. Mostly the definition of something has two parts. The first part tells us its conventional characteristics, like, what's that? Well, that's called a cup, I say. Well, what is it? What's its definition? Well, the first part tells you its conventional characteristics. It's, flat-bottomed clay container. It's conventional characteristics. The second part tells you its job, which is the crucial thing to understand. This is establishing the conventional nature of something in order to discover its ultimate nature. This is the way they talk. So mind, the second part, its job is to hold my tea. You could say it like that. That's what that is. That's what it does. That's its meaning. That's its job. That's its function. So mind, the first part of the definition is it's that which is clear. Or sometimes they say luminous. And of course we get all excited. It sounds nice and cosmic. It just means not physical. Now straight away that throws us. Because when we think of not physical, we think of something like, well, mathematics is not physical. It's just abstract concepts, But this is the crucial point. I mean, the Buddha radically differs, on the one hand, from all the the creative religions in denying the existence of a thing that they call a soul, or the Christians, the Muslims call it a soul too, I think. The Jews, I think, call it a soul, not sure. But the Hindus call it a self, an Atman. The Greeks talk about some kind of essence. So the materialist view, as we know, asserts nothing not physical. There is simply the brain. There's physical, that's it, Well, Buddha has neither of those views, that we're only physical or that there is a thing that's called a soul. And of course, all the creative religions would say it comes from a creator. We are created by a person they call God. Nothing like that in Buddhism. Buddha argues with that view. It's a dualistic view, and he would argue that it is not valid. He's not being rude, he's just giving his view, from his own experience. So the Buddha would talk about we have a mind, but he says that's not physical. So if that's true, we have to understand the different levels of mind. So we have, in the Vajrayana, it's very helpful, in the Vajrayana system, they talk about how we have the gross level of consciousness, which is our sensory consciousness, and that is inextricably linked to our gross body, this bag of bones, And then we have the subtler level, we have mental consciousness. And this is the crucial one to understand. Mental consciousness, which is our thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconscious, subconscious, all of this. And this is Buddha's expertise, this one, the mental consciousness. So yes, indeed, there is a brain that it exists in dependence upon, but the Buddhist view is crucially that it's not itself the brain. It's not itself physical. It depends upon the brain at the grosser level, but itself is not the brain. And at subtle levels, it's not, there's nothing, there is a subtle level of physicality, but the mind itself is not physical. This is the crucial point in Buddhism. The whole of Buddhism would collapse into a heap of incoherent nonsense if this is found to be true. Mind is not physical. That mind is physical. Would be all Buddhism is just a load of nonsense if that's the case. So all the Buddhist teachings are based on this. And this, of course, is coming directly from Buddha's experience. Anybody who's followed Buddha's methodology since then. So mind is not physical. It's got the sensory level and the mental level. And now the mental level has got different levels of cognition as well. We live at the grosser level, which is conceptuality, thoughts. And these cover a lot more than we think. When we think in our world, when we think of the mind, we think of conceptual, up here, kind of rational theories, mathematical thoughts, musical theory. That's what we think of as conceptual. And then we think of emotions and feelings. But for the Buddha, they're all rooted in being conceptual. Anger is a conceptual story that we have programmed our minds with for so long that it now has this massive physical, emotional component, and that's all we ever get in touch with. We only notice what's going on in our mental consciousness when it comes to the surface as emotion. Then the body is kind of, disturbed. Then we notice. But the mind, it's that all these emotions are rooted in being conceptual stories. It sounds pretty abstract to us. So we live at the level of conceptuality. Besides the sensory, we live at the level of conceptuality. So these genius Indian yogis, and then of course Buddhism using this technique, we use this technique to, and this is in the sutra teachings, to completely subdue that grosser level, to achieve samadhi, concentration, at a level of mind, very clearly, that we don't posit as existing in neuroscience or psychology, which of course is why we think it's mystical. No, this is Buddhist psychology, not something you believe in. The technique helps us do that. And this is a living, existent, extant technique that is being practiced every day by people looking like you and me, accomplishing this samadhi. So Mahamudra uses this technique. But it's said to be a more sophisticated practice, a more advanced practice. And initially, indeed, before Panchen Lama wrote it down, it was just passed on in the oral tradition, So Mahamudra is referring to the ultimate nature of the mind, its emptiness. So Buddha's telling us everything has that characteristic. Everything has that characteristic. But this particular technique is a method for us to get to cognize that the ultimate, these are the words, the ultimate nature of our mind, to realize the emptiness of our mind, and thus to then eventually achieve Buddhahood. But it seems to me, forget the ultimate one. Conventionally, it's hard enough to get in touch with our mind. I remember His Holiness saying in his commentary on Mahamudra, on this technique, the mind is studied in incredible depth in Tibetan Buddhism. coming from all the literature from the past, you know. It's incredibly sophisticated, the knowledge, the knowledge about the mind, how it functions. There's the epistemological model, which itself is incredibly fascinating, the way mind functions. And then there's the psychological model, which is the contents of our mind. And it's totally incredibly fascinating to study all this. And it's got a very unique approach because we're not discussing the brain. And we're not discussing behavior. And we're not discussing what your mother did and what your father did and where you come from and your father and go back to the monkeys and the grandpa and behavior and what the Catholic Church did to you when you're a little girl or anything like that. It's just dealing only with the way the mind works itself, only with the actual mental states. It's quite unique in that way. When we talk about states of mind, I think in modern psychology, we involve it with behavior and certain broad-stroked kind of approaches to the mind, you know. Like you talk about, you know, OCD or something, isn't it? Is that the word? All these different terms we use, but it's like it's mainly about the brain, and it's a very general kind of description. Whereas the Buddhist view describes precise individual thoughts, precise different thoughts, you know. And the ability we have to develop as Buddhists, if we're trying to become a Buddhist, if we're trying to practice, forget in Mahamudra meditation, is to learn to identify the thoughts, identify this in this seeming chaos in our mind. This is our main job of being a Buddhist. This is our main job of being a Buddhist, I tell you. Not wearing 14th century robes, not having a bald head, not living in vows, not doing mudras and mantras and prostrations and having faith in gurus and Buddhas. These are techniques that enable us to do the actual job of knowing your mind and unpacking and unraveling it to degrees of sophistication that we don't even remotely have in our modern psychology, and for which you absolutely need to cultivate samadhi. It's an incredibly sophisticated skill of precision and clarity that enables you to do sophisticated, subtle analysis of the contents of your own thoughts. That's being a Buddhist. That's being a Buddhist. And why you do everything else is to enable you to do that job. The word Buddha tells, I think the Tibetan word as well, the Sanskrit, tells us the job to be done. Actually, it's so tasty. I always quote this, the etymology of this word, Buddha. The first term, the first syllable implies the eradication from our mind of all the delusions and neuroses and unhappy voices of ego, voices of I, the fear-based attachment and anger and jealousy and all these thoughts, all these conceptual stories that we are so familiar with, that we so totally take for granted as being normal parts of a normal person. But the Buddha has found from his own direct experience that these are not the core of our being, have no valid basis, are the cause of our suffering, and because they have no valid basis, because they're misconceptions, they can be removed from the mind. And then Buddha, that implies the development to perfection of everything else in the mind, which is all the virtues, love and compassion, empathy, which are valid cognitions, are valid concepts, are valid states of mind. Not in a moralistic sense, valid and invalid, but valid meaning having a basis in reality. This is a very unusual way to talk. We don't talk like this. So if that's the end result, Buddha, rid of all the rubbish and full of all the goodness, that's the end result, then clearly the job is implied, isn't it? That tells you the methodology. That's the job of being a Buddhist. All the other techniques help us do that. But if you don't do that job, you're not being a Buddhist. So knowing our mind is absolutely crucial. But as His Holiness said, you know, in his commentary, as I was saying before, and then I went off, that, you know, we can learn all about the mind, incredibly sophisticated knowledge about the mind, but to begin to actually taste directly your own mind, wow, that's difficult. So this Mahamudra technique, you know, it's similar to Dzogchen. In this text, Panchen Lama mentions there's all these different techniques that we know that are, you know, from the Sakyapas and the Kagyupas and the Gelugpas and the Nyingmapas, all the traditions that have developed in Tibet. There's dozens, half a dozen, 20, 10, 20 techniques, all of which come to the same thing, as Panchen Lama says, that enable us to get in touch with the first, the conventional nature of our mind, which means the workings of our mind, how it works day to day, and then ultimately, finally, its emptiness. But already the conventional one's interesting enough. Forget the emptiness one, forget that. So, okay, so many delicious ways we can think about, ways we can describe how the mind works. This is so fascinating. So, as Lama Yeshe talks in this book, the mind function, this is really fascinating to us. This is not how we think at all. The mind functions as a mirror. So our mind, which means what? Not discussing the brain, we're discussing all the conceptual stories, because that's the level we function at, not at a subtle level. We're living at the level of conceptuality. There's all these emotions and feelings and thought are all rooted in there being thoughts. But we can't hear them as thoughts because we're so familiar with them. So they function at an energetic, emotional level. We can't hear them at the conceptual level until we start to meditate. So, as Lama Zopa puts it, the way the world out there appears back to us in the mirror of this mind, as Lama Yeshe puts it, the way the world out there, people, things, sound, smell, taste, touch, the objects, basically the outside world is the objects of the five senses, isn't it? Think of that. The outside world, the world beyond me, this body, out there from me onwards, is the objects of the five senses, put it very simply. And think about it, from the second we wake up in the morning until the second we go to sleep, that's where all our attention is. So therefore what goes on, so how all of that appears back to us in the mirror of our mind is totally according to the condition of the mirror. So if the mirror is crystal clear, no blemishes, no cracks, no dust, then everything out there will appear accurately. See, this is the part that's very shocking to us. It sounds very fundamentalist that Buddha says there is a way that things exist ultimately. There is a way that things exist in reality. This sounds very fundamentalist, like he's dogma, like he's telling us we've got to believe what he tells us. No. He says we can discover the nature, we can discover how things exist. And that's what being a Buddha is, a person who has removed from their mind, cleaned their mirror to the point now everything exists, appears accurately, appears as it does exist, appears, there's no contradiction between the mind and things that exist. Until then, there's always this disconnect because the mirror is cracked, the mirror is dusty, whatever analogy you like. So we're never seeing things as they are. It sounds so abstract to us. But don't mystify it like this hippy-trippy way these Buddhas talk, So what's it mean in ordinary terms? Well, one really nice way to look at it is when we see the distinction between the sensory consciousness and mental consciousness. This is huge already, huge. This should stop us in our tracks. Just any old thing, like this mala. We know, okay, mala, it's the name they give us, a Sanskrit word, I think, for this, Catholics I would have called it a rosary, my rosary beads, wouldn't I, when I was a Catholic? So there, I look, my eyes go here, even my finger, my touch as well, my tactile consciousness and my eye consciousness both contact this thing. And I will say, because my mala, and I'm attached to it, I will say it's a really nice mala. It's a very pretty mala. And I like the feel of it, I'll say. And I like the shape of it, and I like the colour. So I'll say that's a nice mala. It's a pretty mala. It's a pretty mala, I'll say. So naturally, when you see my eyes look here, and you know it's called a mala, and I'll say there's a pretty mala. So naturally, we all will think that my eyes are seeing a pretty mala. Well, Buddha says a load of rubbish, complete nonsense. Because sensory consciousnesses, there are 5, that's how they talk, 5 sensory consciousnesses, the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, etc. That's how they talk. So the sensory consciousnesses are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. You see, all parts of our mind, this is the way mind works, every millisecond of your mind functioning, each second it's cognizing something. There's always there's another way to talk, the way they talk is mind is subject. And it always has an object, whether it's the grosser level or indeed in the subtlest level of meditation. Your mind still has an object. There is something it cognizes. Mind, by definition, is that which cognizes. Oh, sorry, that's the second part of the definition. The first part tells you it's not physical. Its function, this is the thing, the second part of the definition, is its job is to cognize. Its job is to know. Its job is to be aware. And so, of course, the question is, well, know what, please, Buddha? Be aware of what? Cognize what? And guess what? He'll say, that which exists. Because he's telling us, Buddha's telling us that we suffer and we cause suffering because we are not in touch with how things exist. This is literally what he's saying. So in order to understand that, I'll get back to the sensory, this consciousness in a minute, looking at the mala, pretty mala. But when we understand in the mental consciousness, you've got 3 categories of states of mind as far as the Buddha is concerned. The neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based, I-based, ego-based, fear-based, disturbed, deluded, afflicted, emotional states of mind, the neuroses that have no basis in reality. They're made-up nonsense. Then you've got the valid states of mind that are, relatively speaking, valid. So the first lot, anger, jealousy, depression. Second lot, love, compassion, kindness, let's say. Third lot, we won't discuss these here, they're the mechanics of the mind. The things that, good concentration, good memory, the ability to distinguish between this and that. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need those. But forget those. So, sensory consciousness, so everything the mind cognizes has its object. So sensory consciousnesses are really gross in their capacity for cognition. And so eye consciousness can only cognize shape and color. That's it. Ear consciousness can only cognize sound, mere bare sound. So then you obviously have to ask the question, when my eyes go here, and within a millisecond I will say that's a nice mala, pretty mala. If my eye consciousness, the sensory consciousness, can only cognize shape and color, then you have to ask the question, which part of my mind is cognizing pretty mala? And that's your mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says. That's what we have to learn to know, to unpack and unravel, and radically deconstruct and reconfigure to eventually have it be in touch with how things exist. That's Buddha, finally. So in other words, the millisecond we open our eyes, from then on in the rest of the day, what are we doing? But we're interpreting. Our eyes, our 5 sense consciousnesses cognize certain things. And we are continuously, unceasingly, in the mental consciousness, giving opinions about it. So basically, at the millisecond, my eyes see that and my tactile consciousness feels this. In a millisecond, quicker than Google, and I'm not joking, Lama Yeshe says in Mahamudra, when you've got concentration, the mind, we can't even conceive of how brilliant the mind is, how ingenious, how astonishing, how vast and clear, more brilliant than any computer, the way Lama Yeshe put it. So the millisecond my sensory consciousness gets its feedback, then instantaneously, quicker than Google, mental consciousness is accessed, and out of my mouth comes an opinion. And where's that opinion? That's a mental state, a concept, a thought, an opinion, a viewpoint, an idea. So our heads are full of ideas, viewpoints, opinions. Now, the tragedy is we don't think it's an opinion. I don't think it's a viewpoint. This could be an interesting pretty mala. I'm not sure. What do you think? No, it is a pretty mala, period, isn't it? Look at the world. These are all conceptual stories. So there is some valid conceptuality. There is some valid cognition at the level of conceptuality. Simply speaking, it is a mala. It is called, the colour, you could say, is amber. They're relative truths. If I say that's a blue toilet, we're in trouble. So relatively, there is a valid cognition there, a yellow mala. But the rest, and that's what we can't see, is all the delusions coming in, the attachment, in this case attachment, I'm attached to my mala, that overlays what's there. And that's the opinion that speaks most to us, And of course, the subtlest one is the ego, the ignorance that underpins the attachment, that sees this amber mala out there existing deliciously from its own side, having zero to do with my mind. That's the root problem. That's how the world appears to us. So bad enough, as Lama Zopa says, that the mind, that things in the world out there appears back to us wrongly, meaning through as they say in Buddhist psychology, in the aspect of whatever's in the mind. So bad enough that, that person whose politics I have aversion to appears back to my mind as ugly and bad. But the killer is, I believe it's an objective fact. I mean, we understand this process. We know very well we can have opinions about people, extreme opinions. I mean, you calm down and you change your opinion. Therefore, they don't seem as bad as you thought. It's obvious because that's the killer. That and that the attachment or aversion. So there's attachment and aversion, the two main ones Buddha talks about. If we can understand these two among the afflictions, I tell you, we'd be pretty sophisticated in our knowledge of our own self and everybody else. The key job of these delusions, the key job of these first category of states of mind, the neurotic ones, the deluded ones, the afflicted ones, the key function is to exaggerate. They're conceptual stories that exaggerate something. So attachment exaggerates the deliciousness, the nice qualities of something. Aversion, say of the ex-boyfriend who cheated on you, exaggerates his ugliness. We kind of can see this. I mean, the whole world appears to us in the aspect of either attachment or aversion, and then variations of those all the time. Things that appeal to you, you get excited, you want to go towards it, and it looks lovely, and you want it. Things that are ugly to you, the sound, that smell, that taste, that thing, that whatever it might be, that person, so you push it away and don't want to know about it. These are the two really gross, at the root gross levels that we're working. Attachment to something, grasping at it, aversion, pushing it away. The others all kind of stem from these two, And that's how we're living, kind of being driven from pillar to post by attachment and aversion. And they have this impact upon us emotionally because they're so deeply ingrained in our mind. So even to begin to identify that all the opinions we have in one day, are distorted, polluted by the delusions. It's very hard to see this because for so long we have been seeing that thing as delicious or that person as ugly that we don't notice. We don't even notice that it's an opinion of mine. We think it's the objective truth. In other words, attachment when it sees that delicious chocolate cake. Never thinks we don't think for 1 second that cake appearing really delicious to us. It never occurs to us that appearance of deliciousness isn't coming from the cake. It's very shocking to hear this. But that's what Buddha's saying. So our mind is continuously projecting onto the outside world, and everything appears back to us according to what's in our mind. So to say that there's objective reality sounds a bit hilarious if you start to think this way, because suddenly you start to realize everything's just a projection of your mind. You can easily fall into the abyss of the great mistake, as Tsongkhapa says, and think, well, nothing exists, you know. But what, as Lama Zopa says, when we've understood emptiness, it's as if there's nothing existing. But when we've realized dependent arising, there is something existing. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't. And this is not just talk, this is really delicious, you know. So the mind is everything. The Buddhist view is the mind is everything. The mind is everything. The mind is everything. Everything comes from the mind. The entire universe, this sounds cosmic, the entire universes of existence, universes, human, and all the things the Buddha talks about, hell realms, God realms, human realms, Lord knows what, they're all literally over eons of time, creations of conceptual thoughts. This sounds beyond hilarious. In the modern science, we look objectively at the physical world and try to find its nature. If you're a Christian, everything's made by God. These are two extreme views, and for Buddha, neither of these. So there is objective reality. There is a cup, there is a mala, there is a computer. That you can't deny. These are valid concepts insofar as we have come up with, within our relative way of talking, that thing is a computer. We define it and we check that it functions, so we call it a computer. That's a mug, it holds my tea, we agree, we shake hands, it's a mug, it holds my tea, and it functions in that way. So but what we don't notice is we've got layers and layers and layers of as Lama Zopa says, you know, what delusions do, what the neuroses do, what the misconceptions do, is they decorate on top of what is there layers upon layers of characteristics that aren't there. I just find this so delicious to think this way, you know. It's so internal. It's so precise. This is the Buddha's view. So in Mahamudra, what we're trying to do is get in touch with our mind at a subtle level. And of course, it's not easy. On the face of it, this technique, as Lama Yeshe jokes and talks, and people always talk this way, that, you know, Dzogchen and Mahamudra, well, they all sound so easy. Because this is what's interesting. As Panchen Lama says, there are two ways, two methods of realizing emptiness. Well, in fact, you could even say two methods of knowing anything, even just ordinary conventional reality. So if you think about, you know, and he says basically he's saying one method, and this is the typical method we use, and as Lama Yeshe said, that was the method he used in the monasteries, where he studied the theories. You study the theories. They study for 10, 20 years and do debate and then do meditating on it. You study the theories, and then as a result, through that, you can then meditate and make it your personal experience. But the other method, no theories. You go straight to meditation. So that sounds delicious. Sounds, I don't have to prostrate. I don't have to do any squeezing my brain and study all the boring old philosophy. Oh, I like that, we think, you know. But actually, this technique is really sophisticated. So I think it's like this. You listen to this. As we know, if you want to study music, like say classical music, I mean, you've got to squeeze your brain first, studying incredibly sophisticated conceptual thoughts, isn't it? All that conceptuality, all those musical theories, incredibly sophisticated. Then on the basis of that in your brain, and you memorize it and learn it and put it together, make it coherent, you then slowly put your hand on the piano and start to play the music. And then you practice and practice and practice until it's automatic. That's how we learn everything. And this is the typical way you'd study the Dharma. You'd listen to the theories and you go home and then you internalize it at the deeper level of your mind, from the conceptual to the experiential. That's how we learn everything. That's how you learn to make a cake. Nothing special. But this other way, the Mahamudra way, is like you don't study any of the musical theory. You go straight to the piano and try to intuit Bach. Now, that's difficult. Come on. It's incredibly sophisticated. Well, that's what Mahamudra is. So in other words, the ironic thing is the only person who's capable of going straight to the piano and intuiting Bach is the person who's studied the theory. Do you understand? No way in the world could you do it otherwise. So it is just, it's just how they talk, it's the culture of how they talk about Mahamudra. So then those 3-year-olds, I watch on YouTube, those little 3-year-olds, you know, who play Bach. You can't believe your eyes. You think somebody's photoshopped YouTube, you know, you can't believe it. Clearly they must have done it before, because it's logical, you know, if you think of karma, there's no other way. These little things with these little tiny fingers, you know, it's insane. So, okay, so Mahamudra, from that point of view, Lama Yeshe was always so kind to us. When he first met Western people, it happened to be Western people he first met, in Kathmandu, actually, the late 60s. He would have been about 30-something himself, quite young. Lama Zopa was 20-something. In Darjeeling, actually, they both escaped from Tibet at different places and met in Baksadur, that place in North India where all the Tibetans were sent when they first escaped. And then they went to Darjeeling because Lama Zopa got, a lot of the Tibetans got, TB, coming down to the hot, sticky India from clear Tibet, you know. So in Darjeeling one year, in 1967, they met their first Western student. And they started to learn English. So Lama Yeshe somehow had this incredible ability, because, okay, go back. This is the thing about the mind, the Buddhist view of the mind, you know. That this is so obvious if you understand it, that it's like, okay, forget mind. If you are a musician, if you study, if you learn music, if you know the theories, music, cooking, I don't care what the skill is. If you know it, if you are a really good carpenter, you just have to look at somebody, pick up a hammer, and you can tell if they're going to be a good carpenter, because you're aware, you've got the knowledge inside you, and you can see easily how to help a person become a good carpenter. It's sort of obvious. So the same here with helping people. This is our biggest problem in our culture. We want to help the world. We want to help people with their emotional problems, but we don't know our own mind. How in the name of heaven can you help a person with their anger if you don't even know your own? So this is why it's so logical that if you want to help others, you've got to help yourself first, which is what the wisdom wing is, which is all the first level of practice in Buddhism. Mind your own business, get out of people's way, and go put yourself together, please. Know your own mind, dig deep, get rid of your delusions, control your body, control your speech, live in vows, purify your mind, be your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe puts it. That's the first level of practice. Then you open your eyes and you realise everyone's in the same boat, and you're now qualified to help others because you realise your mind and their mind, we're all just cut from the same cloth, you know, different shapes and colours, that's all. And this is what comes from the understanding of the Buddhist view of the mind. When you know your mind deeply and intimately, it's not complicated to know somebody else's. That's how you're qualified to help others. You know, so Lama Yeshe, being this yogi and this scholar, just by looking at these hippies he met, you know, just by looking and hearing them and seeing, they were, you know, we were naked to him. We think it's very cosmic having a person who's clairvoyant, let's say. I mean, and the fact is, in Buddhism, back to the Hindus, one of the natural consequences of getting samadhi, because you've accessed a subtle level of your own mind, you have got clairvoyance. This is a big shock to us in the West, because that's the capacity of the mind at a subtler level to cognize phenomena that are more subtle, which is to say the minds of others, which is to say the past and the future. This is the job of the mind. This is nothing cosmic, but it's cosmic to us in neuroscientific views. This has been around for thousands of years. So as you develop concentration meditation and you get some realizations yourself, you also develop clairvoyance. But you almost as if you don't even need clairvoyance, you just have to look at the person, hear their words, and you can sum them up, you know, because you know the mind. So you hear their mind coming out their mouth. So we're kind of evident. You're sort of standing there naked to these holy beings, you know. So somehow Lama could just, I mean, when you've heard Tibetans talk, when I first met Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe in the mid-70s, it was only like 20 years since they'd left, you know, 16, 17, 15 years since they'd left Tibet. And especially because the Tibetans kept their Dharma so intact in Tibet. As Lama Zopa came, all these Tibetans come out, they're still talking like 14th century, 10th century people. The language they're using, the philosophical language is the same as they talked back in the 1500s. It's like all us walking around talking like Chaucer. So Lama Yeshe somehow, I always joked and thought he must have been born a hippie but pretended to be a Tibetan. He somehow had this extraordinary ability to talk like a modern Western person, you know. Understanding the human mind, understanding where our intense low self-esteem, our incredible neediness and attachment, our incredible kind of a misery, you know, the self-pity me, as Lama Yeshe would talk about it. So he always taught in a way that was so simple that only a great yogi and scholar could do, you know, not just theoretical, but experiential. So Lama taught always so sweetly, so simply, trying to show us the mind, you know, how it functions, why we suffer, and how to change it. So what he also mostly tried to do was, because he could see the intensity of low self-esteem, self-loathing in the West, preoccupation with I, you know, very self-obsessed. That's why we're miserable. That he continues to try to lift us. And that's the thing, initially when you hear the teachings, like I would always joke and I say when I first heard Lama Zopa teach, all you talk about is hell realms, you know, you think, my God, what is this? It's worse than the worst fundamentalist, you know, Baptist you could ever have met in your life. They leave the Baptists for dead. But Lama Yeshe would always be light and funny and try to show our potential. Because that's the thing that underpins all of Buddha's teachings, this word Buddha, the incredible potential we've got. So when you are aware of your incredible potential, then you want to find the things that are blocking your potential. But because we identify with the garbage, we have no sense. I'm sorry, in modern psychology, there is no view of your mind is in the nature of purity. It's like hilarious. What do you mean your brain's pure? It's caca, you know? There's no view like that. But the Buddha's view is incredibly inspiring. That's why it's so important. That's why Lama Yeshe was so moving to me. He always gives you this optimism that it's possible, that your mind has an incredible potential. And when you have that view, you're enthusiastic. So you want to discover what it is that's preventing you from being this marvelous person that is at the core of our being. So even just hearing about how the mind in its nature is clear and pure, it sounds so cosmic, but to try and even understand it intellectually is very encouraging. So Mahamudra meditation then is it's using the two modes of meditation. Buddha teaches two modes of meditation, as in the sutra practices. One is called shamatha, the name of the end result, calm abiding. It's a level of samadhi, a level of this concentration invented by these Hindus. And the other kind of meditation is known as insight or vipassana. So, of course, in the world, there's a technique that's known as vipassana, but simply it's just one of the many techniques that Lord Buddha taught. The one that's popular, I've never done it. I think it's, you've got these two modes of meditation. The first one is you get some focus first. You just simply train your concentration to stay on one thing. You're training your mind to train your mind to focus is like a joke because there's no focus, but you're training your mind not to wander off, basically. You're training your mind to stay on one thing. And why do you want to do that? Because we want to have the mind to eventually go to a more subtle level such that your grosser conceptuality and even your sensory consciousness have completely subdued, have completely ceased, and you've now accessed this subtler level, this incredible state of mind. Why do you want that? Why do you want to access the microscope of your mind? So that you can get insight into how things exist. We can start at any level we have. Right now, with our crazy mind, we can learn to know the two. But as you get better and better at the concentration, so your mind becomes more sophisticated, more clear, more capable of doing the unpacking and unraveling, using the second mode of meditation in order to, here in this case, not this technique that's using your concentration in order then to become familiar with the sensations in your body. The reason what Buddha wants you to become familiar with there, what he wants you to get insight into, isn't the sensations of your body, but is the fact that everything is impermanent. But here in Mahamudra meditation, what Buddha wants us to get in touch with, or what the typical technique is, that with using your concentration, when you do the insight method, and this is both Mahamudra and in the other typical way that's used, you're getting insight into emptiness. That's vipassana, insight into emptiness. So the first part of the meditation is becoming familiar with. That's the see. That's the translation actually of the Tibetan word gom, which is translated as to meditate. But the word of it, the meaning of it, is to familiarize, to become familiar with. That's the word meditate means that. So what are you trying to familiarize your mind with in general? Wisdom and virtue. Training, you're trying to train your mind. So the first meditation, the first technique in the Mahamudra is the same as when you do in anything. You learn to concentrate. But the difference is the object that you're using to focus on. Typically, you'd concentrate on the breath. You'd anchor your mind to the breath to attempt to stay focused. It's a very typical technique Buddha taught. Or if you're Mahayana Buddhist, Tibetan Buddhist, you would visualize the Buddha. That would be your object of concentration. But here in Mahamudra, the object of concentration is the mind itself. And all that means is whatever thoughts pop up. Whatever thoughts pop up. That's what you focus on. You simply watch the mind. Which sounds kind of puzzling. Breath seems easier because you can kind of feel the breath. You can sort of, you can feel it. But watching your mind, sometimes you close your eyes, you try to watch your mind, it just seems like nothing there. But you're learning to use as your object of concentration, and we'll do like 5 minutes before we finish, You're simply learning to focus on the mind. And what that means is whatever pops up. Whatever pops up, whatever arises. So just in general, this is a really brilliant thing to do, actually. What happens is, even just to do this simply, forget the second part, which is then learning, there's a particular way you then learn to get in touch with the emptiness of the mind. Forget that part. Forget that. Forget the insight part. Just look at this part. It's very practical. So, typically we can see, isn't it? Typically, you wake up in the morning, as I said, your eyes open, your senses awake, and your senses completely now get involved in the external world, meaning the pain in your knee, the bright light coming from the window, the sound coming from the kitchen. Within a millisecond, you're absorbed in all the interpretations of the outside world. And then according to that, you get upset or not. We have no control, So already what we have to learn to start to do, forget Mahamudra, already what we have to learn to start to do is by developing a simple little meditation technique in the morning, 5 minutes of watching your boring old breath, or indeed watching your boring old mind. What you're doing is, the benefit from this won't be concentration, I promise, not yet. But what the benefit of this is, you're developing this brand new skill of stepping back. And then when you open your eyes, you go down to the kitchen. Not only will you just now hear the irritating sound of your husband slurping his coffee, but now you're noticing what you're thinking about the slurping coffee. That's the miracle. That's a technique we have to learn to cultivate. This is the simplest, if the benefit of any kind of concentration meditation is this. We won't get much samadhi unless you seriously give up sex, drugs and rock and roll and go to the mountains for several years. And don't think it's supposed to bring some kind of concentration or nice feeling. The greatest benefit for any of us having a simple concentration technique in the morning where you're making the effort to stay on one thing is that you're stepping away and you're attempting to exercise some control over your crazy thoughts. Or even more simply, you're starting to notice your crazy thoughts. Pagonga Rinpoche, in his Lam Rim teaching, says that, when they describe the 9 stages of developing single-pointed concentration. One of the signs of success at the first of the 9 stages is that you think your mind's getting worse. No, it's not. It's like you've never thought of nutrition. Let's say you've never bothered learning about nutrition. And suddenly you study nutrition, you're going to think you're now the sickest person on the planet because you suddenly notice what's going on before you never paid attention. So this is a good thing. And this is one of the biggest misconceptions we have. We think we're trying to get rid of our thoughts. We think we shouldn't have these thoughts. I'm so negative. I shouldn't be this way. I should quieten my mind down. Don't worry about it. Be happy. Even as you're sitting there watching your breath or watching your thoughts, or even sitting watching your breath, you can't help but hear all the crazy thoughts. Well, good. Don't resist them. They've always been there. At least you're knowing them now. So don't be sad about that. Be happy about that, because now you know what you've got to deal with. And because they're not set in stone and because they don't define your reality, you know you can refigure them. So the benefit is when you come down to the kitchen and you hear the slurping coffee, and the next millisecond, normally you would just be blurting out, telling him to shut up, it irritates me. Now you're noticing your interpretation of the sound of slurping coffee, and you realize it's called anger, aversion, which is what your attachment, when your attachment doesn't get what it wants. So you're noticing your mind, and now you can begin the real job of being a Buddhist. Hearing the thoughts, observing them, and then arguing with it. It's only coffee, Robina. Give the man a break. Shut up. If you can't handle it, walk out of the kitchen. You talk to yourself. You start being your own therapist. This is the greatest benefit from beginning to notice your mind, beginning to do some kind of concentration. We've got to have courage to do that because we don't like what we see. We freak out, So when you're doing Mahamudra, the first step is to simply watch the thoughts. Watch the thoughts. Pay attention. You pay attention to whatever pops up. That's it. No opinions. You don't get involved in it. You just watch. And it's a really brilliant exercise. Normally we absorb into whatever's in the mind, have a conversation. 5 minutes later, you wonder why you're angry. We don't even notice half the time. It's so mindless. So we just leave the thoughts alone. Mind your own business and just let them be there. You don't try to make them go away. You don't try to change them. You don't wish they weren't there. You just keep clear and focused and just let them come and let them go. This is already a stupendous practice. Just that. Sorry, I've been talking a very long time. I forgot to ask you to ask questions. Okay, ask me questions now. Come on. Enough of me talking. Yeah. Good, darling.
I have a question about in what stages of meditative absorption, either in formless realm, or maybe it's the level of bodhisattva, that it feels like a black hole.
I've never heard of such a thing, and I have no idea, darling. I have zero idea about, first, what you're talking about, and so therefore I don't know the answer. I'm so sorry. I don't know where you got the information from. I have no idea. You better check the same book that you're talking about, because I do not know the answer. I've never heard of such a thing. Sounds very depressing to me. I don't want to go there. Yes, go. Talk to me. Take the mic, darling. I don't quite understand your question. Say it in a different way, sweetheart. Is the microphone on? Yeah, there you go. Tell me again. Ask it in a different way.
Yeah, okay. I try in a different way. One of the techniques they say it can be used for meditation is labeling the thoughts that are popping up.
Well, that's a different discussion. Yeah, so go on.
I just want to say, to know if in a Mahamudra meditation is a technique that is used, labeling the thoughts, just be aware of the thoughts and let them go.
I mean, you can do a million different things. You can do anything you like. Stay there, keep with the mic, keep it. So just tell me a bit where you got that from and what you think the point is of this. I mean, there's just say some more.
Awareness.
Who?
Awareness. Be aware of the thoughts.
So where did you get this technique? I'm just curious to know where you got that technique. I'm not saying it's not right. I'm just curious who you've been reading or where you learned it. Do you remember?
Well, yes, in this last days, Kathleen MacDonald.
Where, darling?
Kathleen MacDonald.
Oh, which book? You mean How to Meditate?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. I should have remembered. I edited it back in the 1980s. 1984 we put that book out. Okay, yeah, so okay, I now understand. There's a million ways you can learn to work with your mind. So the one I'm describing here is simply using your thoughts as the object of your concentration. So sometimes you can just watch the breath. You just decide to pay attention. This one is just paying attention to what your thoughts are. So here the technique is, in this particular Mahamudra one, is you don't have an opinion about it and you don't label them either. You don't do any of that. But what you're just saying is another technique, and this is also fantastic. There's a million ways to eventually learn to become familiar with our mind so we can start to change it. So yes, it's marvelous. Perfect. Nothing wrong. It's great. And I think, and what comes from that is something very good, because normally what happens is we'll say, oh, I am angry. And then we get a bit depressed. I am angry. Whereas if you can be a bit more objective, well, there's anger. And don't get involved in it. There's jealousy. That's a very powerful, that can be a technique, and indeed in daily life. Like when you're in the kitchen and your wife or your girlfriend or your whatever are slurping their coffee, that's exactly what you do. You check, well, that's anger. Give it a break. And then you talk to yourself. So there's a multitude of methods we can learn in order to become familiar with our minds and learn to have control over them and then to change them. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Down there.
As I move to, I guess, more emptiness, I've noticed that a lot of things that I cared about before have dropped away.
I'm missing some of your words. I'm so sorry.
I've noticed as I move to emptiness, a lot of things that I previously cared about drop away. And what I'm afraid of is if I move actually to emptiness, that I become nihilistic.
I understand. This is a danger. It really is a danger. Yes, exactly. So, okay. Actually, if we're really doing understanding emptiness, okay, initially what we're trying is you're right. We're loosening the grip of attachment and aversion, and you're not getting so caught up in them. So you become a bit more distant, therefore a bit more detached. And that's crucially part of the process of your spiritual development. But if you keep moving in that direction and forget compassion, then you will become nihilistic, and that'll be a mess. That's a common thing that can happen. It's a necessary thing, because if you think about it, I got all excited about my divine mala that I can't stop thinking about. I look at it every day and want to touch it, and then I start to realize it has no inherent nature. I'll become more distant, and then I'll think, oh, well, I might as well throw it away. No, that's going too far. So that's why the compassion part, the compassion wing is so important. So if you really got the wisdom side and the compassion, so in other words, if you're really working with wisdom properly, when you open your eyes and you become more patient, more kind, more empathetic to others, not indifferent. So it's really important. It's a big danger.
Thank you.
Do you understand? It's really, and it's, it's a danger. But we've got to have a lot of clarity to distinguish between the implication of emptiness and and resisting, as Tsongkhapa calls it, falling into the abyss of the great mistake, you know. Yeah. It's a very common one. Yes, somebody else. Yes.
So I'm very much a beginner, but Mahamudra is my main practice. I want to ask about wonder, that quality of wonder.
Wonder?
Wonder.
What's
awe,
wonder?
Awe.
Wonder?
Wonder, awe.
I beg your pardon?
Awe or wonder. So one of the descriptions of Mahamudra that I connect with is the feeling of a child walking into a cathedral.
Who? What are you saying?
Is it too quiet?
No, I just don't understand what you're telling me. Wonder, what are you talking about?
A-W-E-R.
Awe.
Oh, sorry, my Australian ears. Awe. We say, I get it. But what's it got to do with Mahamudra? Wonder and awe. What are you talking about?
I think it has a lot to do with Mahamudra.
What are you talking about? Who'd you get all this from? Whose book are you reading?
Kalu Rinpoche.
Oh, God knows. I don't know. I love him, but it sounds a bit cosmic to me. He's a young one, is it?
No, the
older one?
The original.
Oh, I have no idea, darling. I mean, all the lamas talk differently.
Fine.
So tell me what he says.
Less about
differently.
what he says, maybe just an instruction.
What does he say?
Well,
I love it. Go on, what's he saying?
I'll just speak to my own experience.
No, I don't want to know about your experience.
Oh,
I just want a
okay.
question. What does he say, and ask your question after?
Okay. He says, Mahamudra, mind looking for itself. There's a quality of wonder as the mind never sees itself, but there's this sort of sparkling, there's a wondrous quality to it.
Okay, I'm very happy. That's a great yogi talking. So what's your question?
Well,
Keep it on the earth, petal.
yeah, for me, I wonder whether that wonder is a result of the practice or whether when I sit down, it makes sense to sit with an intention of wonder. That kind of...
I don't know anything about any of that, and I can't talk that way, and I don't know the answer. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
No, you be quiet with all your dumb questions. I'm not dumb. She's not dumb, but she's asked these clever questions. Now, just wait a minute. I mean, okay, it's a bit like... excuse me, you're not dumb. That's my rudeness. Listen, sweetheart, listen. You. It's a bit like what you're doing is quoting Rinpoche as if he were the best cook in the planet, describing the taste. That's just to encourage you, darling. But if you don't bloody well know the recipe, there's no point in just getting carried away with the taste. Use it to inspire yourself to go back to the basics and learn the recipe. Are we communicating? Do you understand me? You don't look like you do understand me.
I understand you. I just don't know if I agree with you respectfully because...
What? Okay, stick with cakes.
Cakes.
Stick with cakes.
Yes.
And Karl Rinpoche is the best cook on the planet and is describing to you the bliss of the taste. Tell me then what you are going to do with that when you read it.
Because Mahamudra is recognizing...
No, I'm talking about cakes here.
Because...
Tell me what you will do with Karl Rinpoche's description of the delicious taste.
You have to forgive me.
What will you do with it?
You have to forgive me, but the metaphor of cake breaks down precisely because
I don't know
Mahamudra
what you're telling me.
is natural mind.
Oh, you just rabbit. You bloody... I'm going to swear here.
Okay.
You fucking intellectual people. All these mystical yogis, excuse me, please forgive me. I don't know what you're talking about. Sweetheart, no, not yet. In a minute. I'll abuse you in a second. Listen to me. I want you to answer my question. What would you do with Karl Rinpoche's encouraging you by telling you how blissful the taste of the cake is? What would you do? What's your next step?
I would be tasting the cake every step of the way as I make it.
You got to make it first. You got to learn the recipe. Then you can make it and then you'll get the taste. The only reason the yogis talk to us like this is to encourage us. But people get so cosmic, you know. Wow, I'm going to get the taste of the cake, and you wouldn't even know how to make it. What point is that? What? Anyway, just that's my advice to you. But you do what you like because you don't agree with what I say, so why bother asking me a question when you have your own views already? Very set. Honey child. What did you say about nature of the mind? What are you talking about? What did you say before, those words?
Natural mind.
And what does that mean, dear?
My understanding is Mahamudra, there's no meditation, there's no wandering, there's no distraction, there's just the mind resting in its natural state.
Okay, very good. Sounds lovely. You passed an exam. You did well. Next question, that gentleman there. The gentleman just here, the white shirt.
Sure.
Yeah, you done.
I just wanted to make one comment. I think what he meant by the sense of awe and wonder is simply living in the moment, not in yesterday or not in tomorrow.
Well, I mean, that's might be, you might think of it that way, and that
Right.
sounds good to me. And that means you've given up attachment and realised emptiness, and I'm very happy for you.
Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, good. Thank you so much, darling. I agree. That sounds good, yeah. I think all I'm trying to get at here, people, okay, forgive me. Okay, never mind. That doesn't matter. Next question. I'll try not to be too rude. Go on. You, come on, sweetie pie, let her have it, her delicious question.
Thank
What's your
you.
question?
I have a friend recently received a transmission, and
I'm very
then
happy for them, yes.
she seems to be no longer has an ego, like
Oh,
genuinely.
come on, you people, I'm so depressed. Can we talk about the weather or something? I can't bear all this talk. I just can't bear all this talk, you know, it's just all intellectual. I mean, you realise, Mahamudra, honey, if I can come, you with the stripes, whom I know, if I can come and kick you in your balls and smash you in the face, and you can stay in the bliss of the moment, then you're doing a good job. I won't bother, because I wouldn't dare. So it's fine to go on about it, the end result, but just keep on the ground, you know. May I suggest, I mean, even attempting what you just said, the man with the white shirt. It's incredible to do that. But to be able to do that is pretty advanced. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So just keep moving. But awe, wonder, I don't know. I mean, I'm happy he talks like that way. I love Lama Yeshe, all these lamas. They're trying to just encourage me, that's all. I think, for me to go to sit on my cushion and do it. You know. No ego. What's your next question, baby? You can't wait. She's got this beaming smile and these questions keep pouring out of her mouth, none of which I can ever answer. Someone online? Yes, sweetie, go, Maria. Go, honey.
Namo Guraya, Namo Guraya, Namo
Richie.
Dhammaya, Dhamma
Just speak it
Sanghaya.
to me, Maria. Say it in your own words, darling.
Thank
I'd like to
you.
hear your voice.
Thank you.
But I can't
thank
hear you,
and-
Petal. We need the volume on or something. Do we need? I don't want to read it. I want to hear her voice. I want to hear her voice. Can we speak to me?
Hi, thank you so much as always for your kindness and gentle patience with us.
Gentle patience, I wouldn't call it. So sweet.
No, I teach kindergarten to 12th grade, and I've been teaching since 1993, and I'm seeing more and more jealousy, more anger, and younger and younger, and just more fear.
Wow.
And I tried to get them to just sit and try to meditate for a minute
There
and
you go.
just try to get a little bit of the darkness out.
That's so sad, isn't it? You're seeing more and more.
Darkness, like they're afraid, they're scared, they're jealous, they're angry. And I keep trying to
Little
tell
kids,
them to,
little kids.
yes, little 5, 15, 12, all of them. And because of the social media, the society, and they're obsessed with the phones. And I'm like, that's not reality. That's not reality. They're
Okay.
not, they're just seem more and more disconnected from the real world and trying
So
to
you
get them
just
to
love
look
them,
on
darling,
themselves.
and you help them see their own little minds. That's good, what you're doing. That's wonderful. You just hold their little heart and show them their potential. Isn't it? Wonderful. Thank you, darling. Thank you, Maria. What else? Yes. Where's the mic, sweetheart?
Thank you so much for teaching us, Venerable Robina.
Okay.
It's a pleasure to have you in a
Good,
certain
darling.
sense.
Thank you so much.
So I've noticed you do this just with the gentleman in the stripes here. When people come up with abstract concepts, terminology, you tend to shout them down and
I know,
point
very
at-
rude. I'm sorry.
No, my question is, what is the danger that you see in this approach?
Okay, I understand.
And why do
Okay.
you do that?
I understand. No, I mean, okay. Okay. It's okay. If we can be inspired, that's the point. But I think what my feeling is, when we hear these words, like we'll read the words in the book we assume they're coming from the yogis who've got the experience. Like to say, using the example of Lama Yeshe being the best cook, he's telling us his experience. So I think we make a mistake of thinking by somehow I've got to get the experience. But that's my point. You can't get the experience until you know how to make the cake. I mean, if he talks about how blissful the taste is, that's what he's doing. Awe, wonder. Lama Yeshe talking, when he talks, he's giving me the yogi's experience of it. So all I know is, what's the point of me talking about that as if I've got it too? I've just got to be reminded I want that taste, so I'm going to sit on my cushion and do the work. But when you start to learn to make the cake, you're not saying blissful, wonder, or I'm saying 4 eggs, 2 this, 3 that. Then when I've done it, now I can taste the cake, and then I'll go, oh yeah, that's what he said. So I think we use it as inspiration, not can think of it as the technique itself, and then just talk like that. We love to talk like that. Wow, Mahamudra is all war and all awe and wonder and the nature of this and being in the moment. I'm not being sarcastic. Please don't misunderstand me. If it can inspire us to practice, then that's fantastic. Does that make sense or not? Or you don't agree with that part? You said you didn't agree with me. Give the mic. Give him to the mic now. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
I just want to say, I think it's tremendously good advice for me, because you're right that I have a state chasing mind. So I want that chocolate. So you're absolutely right. Full stop. I do in my heart feel that there is something special about Mahamudra, because you're not making Mahamudra.
Wait a minute, but okay. You mean theoretically, as a technique, there's something special about it. That's your opinion about this technique. So tell me, because you haven't, is that what you're saying? I mean, that's what the Lamas tell us. So why are you telling me? The Lamas already tell us that. So why are you telling us as well?
The thing that I'm really trying to figure out in my own practice, and the reason I asked the question, is because when we talk about making a cake or becoming an expert at the piano, it feels like a growth progression.
No, I know, but you're being theoretical. That's my point. You're being theoretical. You're giving me a nice theory. I understand your point, sweetheart. Then there's nothing to say then, if that's the case. There's nothing for you to say, unless you have an actual question, So you didn't have a question. You just said, what does he mean by wonder and awe? I don't know, that's Lama Yeshe. I mean, I'm not trying to argue or be rude. I mean, I am being rude, but we've got to distinguish between what am I going to do with that information that I read? What am I going to do with that? So that tells me I've got to go and make the cake. That is the progress, yes. Or I sit on my cushion and do what the Lama says and try to taste the nature of my mind, try to keep it concentrated. I do it, yeah, I do it. So if that's the case, I don't know what to say then. If you do that, then great. If you're trying to make it do it, then great, go for it. Do it. I don't know, are we communicating? No, I'm not sure. Yes, back at the back there. Yes, sweetheart.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a bit of a practical question.
Yeah, please.
When I'm meditating and trying to watch
you what, sweetheart?
My mind, I find myself making the object of meditation itself the object, and my mind is kind of associating with, okay, I'm meditating, and now although I'm watching my mind, what's going on in my mind.
Start again. Say it differently.
So what I'm saying.
So what's the technique you're trying to discuss? What you're discussing?
I'm not discussing. I don't know about this technique, but I've been using the Waking Up app, Sam Harris's app, and
you've been what?
I'm using an app to meditate, and I'm relatively new to meditation.
Okay, good going. So what's the meditation that you're learning?
And this particular meditation, like watching your mind, that came up.
Watching the mind, okay. Yes.
So when I was doing that, I ended up associating with meditation itself. So that became the thought.
You mean you're having it and you're sort of analysing it to yourself?
Me meditating
Yeah, no, that's
became...
very common. Our minds are so complicated.
So any advice on that? That's
Yeah, well, we do like that. We can't help it. We can't help making a commentary and observing ourselves doing something. You just go back to doing it. Just going back to whatever the thing is you're trying to watch. Sometimes as a meditation, you just simply focus on the breath and you see yourself getting all complicated. You just go back to doing it. You just keep the training. You just keep training. It's sort of like you're learning how to play tennis and you observe yourself making commentary to yourself about learning to play tennis. Oh, shut up, Robina. Just pick up the racket and do it. So you train yourself just to keep doing the instruction. That's all. You just keep training. That's it. There's no quick fix. There's no kind of, you can't stop it because our mind's very complicated now. Our mind's always chatting away, having opinions. You just stay focused. Go back to doing it. You just stop and go back to doing it. But get the technique very clear. I mean, what is the actual technique? What do they tell you to do exactly? Because there's millions of meditations. What do they say exactly, the one you're doing? What does it say? What's the job you're supposed to do?
Notice the thoughts that...
To notice the thoughts. That's what they say.
So
sit down, be comfortable, and then notice the thoughts. Do they say anything else to say? Anything else? Okay. Well, that's fine. Just do that then. So just... Okay, that's very kind of wide open, though. You could do many things with that. So, there's different... I mean, the one he said was an example. The one I'm saying is another example. Mm-hmm. You simply just notice the thoughts with no commentary. Another one can be quite helpful, especially in the daytime when you're walking around and you're catching your thoughts. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a bit of anger, or there's jealousy. It can be very helpful. Sort of not I'm angry, I'm jealous. That's what we tend to do. That can be very helpful, identifying. There's a multitude of things. There's millions of techniques, millions of meditations. I mean, so many. So you've got to just be clear which one you're doing and see why you're doing it. Do they talk about the purpose of this? The goal of this, the benefit from it? Do they discuss that in this app?
It was described along the lines of what you...
What, darling?
It was described along the lines of what you explained earlier.
Okay.
So
I think...
Just noticing what the mind is doing, not when you're not meditating. And I noticed that I guess like I do better during the day, noticing myself, noticing my thoughts,
yes, I understand.
but not while I'm meditating.
No, because it seems so, I know, because the mind is so busy, isn't it? Our mind is so busy. Yeah, just keep moving.
Thank you.
Find what works for you. Keep
Thank
moving. Keep moving. Okay. Yes. What else, people? Somebody else online. Yes, Joey, sweetheart, yes. Unmute, sweetie. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Can't hear, darling. Can't hear, Joey. You have to unmute yourself, sweetheart.
Sorry.
That's it.
Sorry, Robina. And thank you. This is just incredible to me because when I meditate, and when I've been meditating over the last few months, I have thoughts come into my head. I do whatever I can do, whatever I can possibly do to get the thoughts out of the head. Mm-hmm. So this is so powerful. Like I can't wait to meditate tonight before bed and just notice the thoughts.
Yeah, that's
like.
One of the things, Joey, that I know there's somebody I know who really tries to concentrate, does concentration meditation, and she said she spends all her time forcing the thoughts away, and she becomes exhausted. That's not the point at all, darling. You see, Joey, our minds are going, even I think in Western psychology, they say there's like 1,000 thoughts a second. I think Buddha agrees. So we're starting with this total chaos in here, and there's a million different approaches to... In the long term, the Buddhist approach is to try to get incredible, effortless control over our thoughts to the point that the deluded, neurotic ones are gone and only the virtues are there. It's this work in progress. So there's a starting point. And very absolutely, the biggest misconception is you're supposed to make the thoughts go away. You'll go mad. You can't. So just it's to loosen the grip on the thoughts. So just this practical approach is simply sit and just allow the thoughts to come and go, to not control them, and just stay focused. And then the thoughts have less power because you're not having conversations with them or fighting with them. You understand, darling?
I do. Thank you so much.
Give it a go.
Thank
Good
you.
go. Okay.
Bye-bye.
What else, people? Yes. Yes, sweetheart.
Hello. I have a question on an antidote to anger. We were discussing anger. And when it arises in the mind, sometimes, you know, it's easier to see when you're like punching somebody in the face and you're like, that was sweet. And you enjoy that moment of anger, and that's kind of in the grosser level, but in the subtle ways, I know that I've probably know this somehow, but really my question is on what's the antidote to anger on the subtle levels?
Oh, darling, okay, well, yeah, okay, well, you get the subtle level. We've got to start with the gross level, don't we? You see, the more the more, and we're using the Buddhist model of the mind here, the more we can understand, even theoretically, what anger is, the more we can deal with it. So let's just talk about that first, okay? So anger, typically the way the Buddhism would say, and it's so powerful, that anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So the implication here is, and this is the Buddhist view, this attachment is just this primordial drive for most of us. This is not our view in the modern world. This is Buddha's very unique view. And it's this multifaceted kind of emotional hunger, neurotic drive that is always wanting what I want. It's very subtle. You can be a really kind person, loving and generous, and this is our saving grace. But still this attachment is there until we're highly sophisticated practitioners. And it's this constant sense of, you know, this neediness to get only the nice things, to have everything the way I like it. That's really, I mean, we can identify that. You can see somebody, you get annoyed when your hubby slurps his coffee. You get upset when you see the red light. The tiniest thing can happen and we'll get annoyed, upset, irritated. They're polite words for mild anger. Because attachment is always desperate, and it's kind of not happy feeling, is always desperately wanting everything to be lovely. And what that means is desperately wanting everything to be the way I want it. So it's a totally self-centered state of mind. It's very subtle, it's very pervasive, and it colors everything else, even our good stuff. So when we can see that aversion's the bare bones state of mind. When the millisecond attachment doesn't get what it wants, the sound, the smell, the taste, whatever it might be, that's a rising of aversion. So if it's fairly mild, it'll be irritation, upset, annoyed. That's just anger at a mild level. And if it's volatile, it'll be shouting and yelling anger. Do you understand? So this is the dynamic. And we're going between these 1,000 times a day. So when we are aware of that broader approach, then you're going to be catching your mind like a hawk. So obviously the antidote comes from when you notice it arising. So our trouble is we don't notice at the volatile level, we don't notice we're angry until the mind's crazy or until the words are vomiting out the mouth. Or we don't notice we're angry until, you know, you're kind of annoyed and frustrated and you suppress it, you know. So we've got to be catching our mind. And that's why it's observing your mind, observing it all the time. And you're seeing it and you think, oh my God, I'm a worse person. I'm getting so much more angry. No, you're not. It's just there. So the more you can be aware of your mind throughout the day, whatever, have practices, the more you can catch it before it becomes emotional. That's the ideal. So the commonest thing we ask is, and you're not asking this necessarily, when I'm just there in the middle of getting angry, what can I do? Well, that's like saying you're on the freeway going 120 miles an hour and you just notice that your wheels are falling off. What'll I do? Well, it's a bit late, isn't it? That's too late to ask. If you'd been going to the mechanic and noticing the wheels wobbling, which is meaning noticing your mind, you would never get to the point of the wheels falling off because you would have been maintaining your mind. But we don't notice our thoughts until they come at the emotional level, and it's too much to ask that we do something about it because we're not qualified. So we have to start watching our mind every day, noticing, owning the fact that you get irritated easily or get angry easily, and then you make decisions. It's not my true nature. I want to become more patient. And so you just start practicing, and then you catch your mind before it becomes emotional. That's the ideal. And then you have to work with yourself. It's cognitive therapy. It's discussing with yourself, dealing with what's arising in your mind. Do you understand? This is a general approach.
Yes.
But does it answer your question?
Yes, it does.
It feels like the butter's about to come, though. No? It's a slow process, honey. It can't be overnight. We've got these habits since we're tiny. We've been programmed since we're babies in these habits, and we just tend to take them all for granted, you know. This is who I am. I'm just an angry person. I'm this, I'm that, you know. And the other one is you're not to be guilty or neurotic about it. Anyway, I'm just talking. I'm just chatting. Is anything useful?
No,
Was
that's
that
it.
useful? That was okay?
Yes,
All right,
thank you for sharing.
Okay, good. Thank you. What else, people? Time to go home, I think. 8:07. Yeah, it's true. It's time to go home. I'm sorry I'm rude to you all. Swearing, saying things. I know it's not, talk about cool. It's not cool. Makes people some. Anyway, fine. But, communicating. So, keep reading these marvelous yogis, please. That's the thing. That is the thing. See, like, for example, Lama Yeshe, my Lama, or Lama Zopa, and when I'm editing their teachings, they're saying all these things. Lama will talk from his own experience. He doesn't say it like that. He's not arrogant. But it sounds just so delicious, you know, when he talks about the mind being this way. And all I can do is think, wow, I'm so happy to know that I can taste that. So then I keep going, keep working, keep practicing. You understand? Perfect. Wonder and awe. I'll never forget that. I like that. Awe. I had to go on the part. I didn't get that one. Awe. I know when I've got a male friend called Don, and I have a female friend called Dawn, but they sound identical in American. Dawn and Dawn. You know, I can't hear it. I just can't hear it. Okay, you people. So keep moving. I think this is the one, keep knowing, keep identifying with your potential. Keep identifying with your true nature. Keep identifying with your virtue and goodness and your wisdom. Yeah, keep identifying with your awe and wonder. Keep identifying with your bliss, all of this. And just keep doing the work. Keep doing the job. That's it. That's it. Never give up. Jamchub, Semchog, Rinpoche, Makye, Panam, Kyegyu, Chik, Kyepa, Nyampa, Mepa, Yang, Gongne, Gondu, Pabasho. May we never no, never mind that one. Okay. Gewa di Nudu Dag Lama Sangye Drugyo Ne Droa Chikyang Malupa De Sara Gurpa Shok. That will do for now. Okay, sweethearts. When am I coming next? When's my next date?